Hello and welcome to today's CDCT live session. I'm Jason Rader and I'll be your host today as we talk about understanding the role of SASE versus SD-WAN in a cloud security environment. Today with me, we've got two brilliant guys that are going to be helping me along with the conversation. We've got Michael Moore, Practice Development Manager, and we've got Douglas Gatto, Senior Architect with us here at CDCT. Hey guys.
Good morning, Jason.
And just to kind of let our folks know, we had kind of already done a session on SD-WAN. We're going to think if you want to talk or hear more about that, there's a great session to see on the website related to that. So we're going to pick up kind of where that left off and go into the more comparison between SD-WAN and SASE. So with that being said, why don't we kind of pick it up from there, guys? Where do we go from here, Mike?
Well, I think this is a good spot as any. I mean, like you said, we talked about SASE, SD-WAN, how it kind of fit together, how we're seeing kind of a shift to adopting SASE. And for those who aren't familiar with that, Secure Access Service Edge, coined by Gartner, really. I think there's a bunch of different places out there that call it a little bit different thing, but SASE is what's really been sticking, catching hold with everything. And really, it's just that mesh of SD-WAN or networking, meeting, cloud security, all coming together to be one big happy family, and giving us a little more agility in how we approach accessing cloud applications, how we apply security to end users, and also our branch locations. So really just more of a new framework that brings networking and security all together.
And Doug, why don't you shed a little more light on that? Like, take us from a SD-WAN into the SASE world.
So when we're thinking of, kind of comparing the two technologies, SD-WAN and SASE, the first thing I need to point out is that SD-WAN doesn't have an inherent security kind of play included in the actual solution, right? That's the first thing I want to point out, which is one of the main differentiators where SASE is kind of tying these things together. So when you think about it, SASE and SD-WAN are really just two solutions designed to, connect geographically disparate endpoints, together in a flexible and adaptable way. They're kind of two different networking technologies, if you will, that use a different means to get to the same end, right? Okay. So when we look at it from kind of an architecture perspective, SD-WAN is SDN applied to the WAN interface, right? It uses that virtual network overlay to connect DCs, HQs, remote offices, all with the centralized management. And the focus is placed on connecting these remote locations back to a central private network, and then, allow that spoke connectivity, right? Now, SASE, on the other hand, does focus on the cloud, right? So SD-WAN has, SaaS, can optimize SaaS performance, use on-ramp capabilities, things like that, but it's not built with the cloud as a focus. Whereas SASE, the cloud is the focus, and SASE runs with a more distributed architecture, right? Instead of focusing on kind of connecting branches to a central network, SASE really focuses on connecting individual endpoints, like a user, device, branch office, to the actual service edge, where this service edge consists of a network distributed of just of that SASE provider's points of presence, right? So at the POPs is where you're going to have the SASE solution stack, software stack run, and have those integrated routing and security functions. To go a little deeper from a security perspective, I think that, again, to point out, SD-WAN doesn't have, depending upon the solution you use, doesn't have these security functions, the NGFW capabilities, secure web gateways, cloud access security brokers, etc. It's not baked into the solution. It's something that's kind of a feature that you could add on to it, where SASE, it has it baked right in. So the key point as far as a differentiator between SASE and SD-WAN security, to me, is traffic inspection, right? It's just more efficient because traffic in a SASE solution is inspected by multiple policy engines that run in parallel, at each POP. So when the traffic goes there, it's not having to do what SD-WAN does, which is service chaining, right? Where traffic is inspected by one security function at a time, one after the other, right? Each point, solution's got to open up the traffic, inspect it, close it up, send it to the next point, where SASE does these things in parallel at the POP.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Doug was saying there, I mean, there's various ways that you can apply security in the SD-WAN world, right? He talked a little bit about service chaining there. Some solutions have the integrated security feature sets. I mean, so you got the IPS, IDS firewall capabilities built into some platforms. Others use third parties like SASE providers. I mean, there's Zscaler's one that's been out there forever. Cisco Umbrella SIG is very popular in the market now. Prisma Access from Palo Alto. I mean, those are just three that are pretty big, widely used cloud security providers that kind of give you that SASE feel and solution. So as we're talking about the parallel processing that SASE provides, it doesn't mean that you don't need SD-WAN or you shouldn't move to SD-WAN. There is the ability to tie those two together. So when you look at those branch locations and you want to do that kind of security inspection, maybe you don't need a platform that's that all-in-one security appliance and SD-WAN provider. Maybe you just marriage that to a SASE cloud provider. So you're sending all of your traffic that's destined to the cloud to be kind of validated and go through all the checks and balances up in the cloud, rather than having to do that kind of centralized processing where you're service chaining to each of the different things or having that fully integrated solution.
Yeah, a good example is during COVID, right? So, remote access, again, isn't really part of an SD-WAN solution, but SD-WAN providers, kind of had to jump through hoops to help customers, address these issues, like remote access, working from home, where SASE platforms have that capability built right into the solution, whether it's either, mobile clients or even clientless access.
Right. Yeah. And that's the benefit of the flexibility, right? Because you can use it for branch to get that security from your branch office to the cloud, or you can use it for those remote users. So, I mean, you want to make sure that your endpoint's protected regardless of where they are, whether they're sitting in the office, whether they're sitting at a coffee shop, in home, in the airport. So having the ability to go directly to the cloud for that security inspection, but also being able to tie that into your infrastructure and your architecture that you have on premise, it gives you that ability to support them wherever they go. But also, as we start transitioning more and more back into the office, you're going to have that same look and feel for all your users. So, I mean, they're going to be used to these controls, these policies, and it's going to follow them regardless of where they connect, whether it's on-prem, off-prem, or you name it, right?
Yeah, it's a good point, Mike. A user shouldn't have more security because he's sitting at a branch office. So it should be with SASE, the policy is applied to the endpoint context, regardless of where they reside.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that, from a lot of people, SASE kind of hit right as a solution from a COVID perspective of enabling the remote workers. And, we usually talk about this at the end, but that whole adoption strategy of how to implement this appropriately, I want to get to that in a second. But first, we've talked a lot of jargon for a minute, but I think from a business leader perspective, and I love you guys, keep the jargon up, but I'm going to back it up just a little bit. For the business folks that are listening to this, SASE doesn't mean that I got to rip my SD-WAN out and replace it with SASE. I think you already alluded to that, Mike.
Right. Yeah, no, that's not what it means at all. I mean, it could be a stepping stone for you. I mean, take COVID, for example, that you just brought up. We had a customer, I mean, obviously a quick shift to the remote workforce. I mean, civil engineering firm, they had employees all over the globe, 800 total, 20 branch locations, headquarters, tons of field offices, and they needed to move to that remote workforce overnight. So standing up a solution that's agile, flexible, able to support those users. I mean, traditionally the VPN infrastructure wasn't really scaled to support that kind of load. So what's more scalable than the cloud? And that's where a lot of these, I mean, all of these SASE solutions really reside, right? So moving to, I believe in this instance, it was Prisma Access. They were able to connect all these users. They had Global Protect, which was their VPN capability to get back into corporate assets. But if they were going to cloud applications or their file sharing, I mean, you think of a civil engineering firm, construction, there's large CAD files. They need to transfer these between PCs and users. And if they're all remote, they're using their internet connection at home. They're usually sending them back and forth to each other or some kind of cloud service. So having the ability to implement Prisma Access as their SASE provider to get that direct connectivity into the cloud, have all the security, the inspection, get that more cloud-focused security architecture to enable them to do that was really critical in transitioning their workforce to that more remote footprint. And I mean, at the same time, they started seeing some benefits back at the corporate office where the offload of all that VPN traffic that had been going to their head end and then hairpinning back out to the cloud, they saw a 40% reduction in the bandwidth that was being consumed at their corporate data center firewall. So, I mean, when you think about the potential cost savings of being able to potentially reduce circuits, or even just having that availability for other critical applications to leverage that rather than the VPN traffic that should never really be going there in the first place, if you have a cloud solution provider that can do that security and that intelligent traffic steering that you need.
I rarely hear you get security and flexibility in the same conversation. But that's one of the brilliant things about the solution. And then when you talk about that bandwidth savings as well, that added benefit, I mean, that's a pretty impressive combination. Doug,
yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about this.
Well, the other thing we want to think about too, as far as SASE, as far as just the kind of the benefits of what you get out of it is from a security perspective. I hate to keep harping on security here, but to me, I think the security piece of it is so important when you're thinking about SASE, and why you might want to adopt this strategy is because again, the SASE solution is going to inspect traffic at the nearest POP. It's going to apply these policies across, whatever device you have, or branch appliance, DC, whatever. But another big piece of SASE security is zero trust networking access, right? You can't really talk about SASE without talking about ZTNA. And ZTNA is actually starting to begin to not really replace VPN, but just VPN technology. It's kind of an alternative because with ZTNA, users are never really placed on the network, and the apps that they're trying to access are never actually exposed to the internet. Kind of creates that zero attack surface. It's going to protect your business from any cyber threats, right? With SASE solutions, you're only making outbound only connections, so the network and application you're trying to access is really invisible, to unauthorized users, right? And then the other big thing, and Zscaler really took off with this, was the native app segmentation that you get with ZTNA. So that once the user is actually authorized, that application access is granted on a one-to-one basis, right? So authorized users, have access only to specific applications, rather than that full network access you get when you VPN in, or something similar.
So I love the combination. I love what you just said, because that's very interesting. And a lot of folks are definitely talking about zero trust right now, but I think the application security aspects is a real important topic for a lot of people as well. But now that we're talking about security, we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about applications. How much of this has to be coordinated within the organization for it to be successful? Is this something that requires more coordination, or is this something that can be implemented and then everybody just kind of is happy? Is there a standard interface that everybody can go to? What has to change?
Okay, Mike.
Yeah. So, I mean, this kind of goes back to the question you asked too. If you're moving to SASE, does SD-WAN make sense? What does it make irrelevant in your infrastructure, right? So, I mean, I think when we're talking about security and the data, there's a lot bigger conversations that can be had. I mean, ransomware is top of mind. And if you think of SASE and how that kind of fits into the tool set, when you think ransomware, you think of the data, right? You're protecting that data, you're making sure that it doesn't get stolen or encrypted, and you're having to buy it back and probably never see that again. So a lot of times you think that's just a storage conversation, but really it starts at that endpoint. It's your network. It's all the way to your data center to that storage. So with things like DNS level of inspection, that's really your first line of defense. If you think about getting a suspicious email or phishing email, I know we get to see all kinds of examples of phishing email, and hopefully your organization has something like that implemented. Well, they'll send test things to see if everyone's being responsible with their email. But by just one email and clicking a link going to a malicious website, you can infect one PC with malware that could potentially cause a ransomware situation where it gets into that device via command and control, can hop to the next device and the next device, just getting elevated privileges until it gets to that sensitive data. So when we talk about security and the different technologies that SASE can complement, really everything that you have in place today, it can complement that, because you may not have one tool that does everything. SASE is working to get there. It's hosted in the cloud, which is great. So maybe it will be a replacement for some tools. Maybe you can consolidate a little bit to get that more centralized security architecture, to get rid of the disparate. I mean, I think there's a number out there. There's 40 or 70 plus vendors in client environments just specific for security. Any tools like this that we can find that help consolidate that is really going to be beneficial to you in the long run, and help kind of get rid of any another buzz term, technical debt in your environment, that you may have some legacy hardware or tools that it just is too cumbersome to use. It's outdated. And this is a great way to kind of move away from that kind of infrastructure.
Yeah. And if we're talking about like kind of adopting that SASE strategy, right? It's not like something you're going to really just flip a switch and turn on, right? It's going to be something to what, like Mike said, you have to identify your pain points in the network, and it's going to be more of a multi-phased approach to it, right? So, when you're thinking about integrating into your network, you have to kind of analyze your network and say, okay, so secure access service edge, right? So what's the first thing I need to think about? I need to think about my edge, right? What is my edge? Let's define the edge. Is it a data center? Is it, a cloud ISP? Is it, a remote workforce, something like that? And you have to figure out what exactly is your edge. And once you define that, and once you know exactly, what you're looking to, what you're going to put as your WAN edge, the next thing you want to do, obviously, is then define your use cases, right? So, Mike brought up a couple good points about accessing, malware or some type of these types of security use cases. But, it goes a little further when we're talking about, a customer that's looking to adopt this might say, okay, so do we have remote workers with a hardware VPN setup at home, right? Do we have workers with clientless access? You need to kind of develop the use cases first. And then the next thing you want to do really to start is to figure out those network as a service features you want to make sure you have included when you're thinking of adopting SASE, right? So, depending upon your end state goal, you might be trying to move to a borderless architecture. If you have more of a content delivery type network, or you might be looking to stick with the branches, the centralized DC, which means SD-WAN would be a main focus. But kind of after you define your edge, you want to go down to these networking features and say, okay, do I need, obviously I'm going to need SD-WAN. It's a big focal point of SASE, right? Do I have any traffic going over the ocean? Maybe I got to think about WAN optimization. That might be something I need to think about when adopting this strategy, or even bandwidth aggregators, okay? And then once you kind of figure out, your use cases and what you want to do as far as, networking services, you want to make sure that this SASE solution that you're going to adopt and consume actually has these capabilities. Then you move on to the security features, right? And with, most large enterprises, you can't really even consider this a SASE solution without things like zero trust network access, cloud access security brokers, secure web gateways, DNS protection, right? The good thing about the security piece, when you're defining this criteria that you need and these use cases in your network, is that a lot of the security features kind of are integrated with each other, right? Like, for example, you can get, if you're a Cisco umbrella, or even if you're a Prisma shop, you're already going to get, the secure web gateway, the DNS protection, IPS capabilities, sandboxing capabilities, right? So you can kind of consolidate some of these security features into one solution. But really, like, once you determine what you need, you're going to need to really actually conduct kind of an internal review with your team, and then kind of determine what your current gaps are in these capabilities, right? And this could be something like, well, maybe you need to evaluate your IT staff to see what kind of skill sets are lacking, or maybe some of your tools aren't mature enough to kind of integrate with the SASE solution. Again, this is why I always say this is a multi-phased effort, right? A good example. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to say that was what kind of I was driving with that earlier kind of awkward question. Was it sounds like, because if folks are buying next gen firewalls, they typically, that's the security team maybe, or the IT security team, right? But when we're talking about SASE, we're talking about cloud, we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about security, we're talking about policies that need to be developed, we're talking about users. It sounds like that adoption strategy's got to include more than just the standard buyers that we would work with in an infrastructure or next gen firewall play. It sounds like that adoption strategy has to be kind of have input from across a lot of different groups.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, it's if you're coming up on, say, a hardware refresh, right? Let's just say you want to adopt a SASE strategy. Again, you're not going to just turn a switch and turn it on, but something to where you're coming up on a hardware or a router refresh cycle or something like that. Your first step in SASE adoption would be, okay, well, if we got to come up and refresh the routers anyway, let's get a WAN edge appliance that's SD-WAN capable, right? Whether it's hardware or software. So we can start getting the transport flexibility, application aware routing, dynamic traffic steering, et cetera, right? And that could be one phase of the SASE adoption. The next phase could be, the customer had a merger or acquisition, or has a lot of external partners, and they have to think about the sensitive information that they have internally. The next phase of this SASE adoption would be to get that ZTNA zero touch networking access established, right? So you hit it with that phase of the adoption, and then who knows, maybe there's an Office 365 migration on the horizon. That's when you start thinking about, okay, our CASB, then our secure web gateway. So it's just a phased approach. And that's why, the SASE platform you select is so important, because you need to actually make sure the vendor you select actually can support all these different use cases and all these different features that you're going to require in your environment.
Yeah, no, I think we've mentioned Cisco, we mentioned Palo. There's a lot of stuff that's going on out there, and because it's new, some folks are making choices without realizing, kind of like I was just alluding to, of the effects and what you were talking about, that adoption strategy. They might buy it specifically for what they need right now, and they could get locked in without recognizing where they eventually want to be with this thing. And I think that's always, it's the great opportunity that organizations have that are coming up on a refresh right now, because now's a good time to strategically acquire and then move forward with that platform. But it's one of those things where some people, like cloud adoption, they just wait, and that's the worst thing that you could do. But I think it's one of those things where I love being able to, from a people, process, and technology perspective, be able to come in and help somebody with the entire journey and making that appropriate technology, the operationalization, management, all of those things that this platform really can offer an organization.
Yeah, and I mean, just to add on to that, Jason, we work with a lot of the top partners in the SD-WAN space, and what we've seen over the past year and a half is that if they didn't have a SASE-like solution or cloud security, they were out there looking for someone that they could either acquire or partner with to come to market with that, because the need that we've seen in this past year for it has exponentially grown. I mean, this was a technology that was looking to be like 10 years before it was mainstream adoption, and it's accelerated probably within the next 5 that we're going to see people really starting to consume cloud security, tying it into SD-WAN to really modernize how they're connecting to their cloud applications, and to do so in a very intelligent manner, being able to steer the traffic to the right cloud, to the right resource, right data, and to do so securely. So I think it's a really powerful technology. And we're just going to keep seeing a lot more and more of it. And partners that haven't really made the move to that, expect to see their portfolios updating, or unfortunately, I would think they would become obsolete, because it really is a very important aspect of modern workforce and connecting branches of the future, really.
Yeah, we recently did a survey that's going to be published actually this month. That whole cloud journey that we've been talking about, the vast majority of those folks in 2020, for obvious reasons, had to invest in cloud security type technologies, CASB, cloud-based SIEM, those types of things. And again, any platform that allows the integration of security into it, like SASE, is one of those things that I think is an absolute need out there to bring all of these things together. I think we can't emphasize it enough, the multiple vendors that people have to deal with, and the management aspects and the integration aspects that can be crazy. I mean, we do this kind of stuff all the time, come in and take disparate vendors, bring them together, operationalize that stuff. But if you acquire technology and expect the people that were operating technology to now be experts at integrating it and doing it as good as can be done, that's a lot to ask of your operational guys to come in and do that. So that's why, I always love to work with folks and help them understand that strategy, do that good kind of build and transfer with them and get them on a good journey.
Yeah. That's why it's kind of important when you're thinking about the solution from an end state. We're talking about all these, networking and security functionality that we're integrating and things like that. One of the key things I look at when looking at the vendor, depending upon what features, I would need, is did that vendor actually acquire a bunch of companies and kind of are in the process of stitching them together? Because if you select that, you might get some growing pains. Or did they have, did this vendor actually develop their solution natively, right? Maybe they acquired companies years past, but started to slowly integrate these into their own native type of service offering, right? So that's one thing I would say you kind of want to look out for when you're determining a vendor. Did they just stitch a bunch of things together, or is this something that's proven? And have they been delivering? If the vendor's been delivering on their roadmaps, things like that, you'll be able to tell if it's the right solution for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think folks we work with find a lot of value in the fact that we're just not a one vendor shop. We understand kind of the ins and outs. And even if we have an affinity towards one, that doesn't mean it's always the solution. It's one of those things. What do you have on the truck? What are you trying to do? That's really where it matters. And again, those kind of bake-offs can be really exhausting again for people as well. And even then you're kind of still listening to marketing and a roadmap, or maybe, the guys who come out and talk, but it's how that stuff integrates is really, really important. And that's almost, bespoke for every organization that you go out there with. So really getting somebody who understands what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish, and how to get you there, I think is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And that ties back what Doug was talking about too, with knowing what your WAN edge looks like, what those use cases are. Are you trying to enable that remote workforce? Are you shifting to the cloud, more and more reliance there? So, figure out what makes sense to you, what you currently have in your network environment from a vendor perspective, and if there is any alignment for a SASE type solution there, and then go from there. It's a good starting point.
And SASE is not taking away SD-WAN, right? Like SD-WAN's not going anywhere.
Great.
You're still going to have customers that are going to say, I don't want that much of a cloud presence. I don't want, one of the big, people, you think about what is the biggest risk with a SASE solution, and really the biggest risk is essentially, and the way I think of it is kind of a single point of failure scenario, because you have, all these emerging technologies, all these, new cool features, but you're really placing a high degree of trust into this SASE provider, right? And this is kind of what drove companies in the past to just get the best of breed for each networking security feature today. But now going forward,
that hurts sometimes.
And then you have to worry about, keeping the lights on your own in your own business, but then, updating different software packages, updating your platform for emerging threats and things like that. That's really the reason why a SASE solution is just so flexible and adaptable. And I think customers are going to be willing to take a chance on having kind of all their eggs in one basket.
I love it. I think that's a great place to close.
Yeah.
So gentlemen, fantastic discussion. I think, I love laying it out there the way we did. This is, straight talk. It's there's a lot of vendors out there at play. There are a lot of variables that go on within an organization. The cool factor is we talked about flexibility. We talked about security. We talked about savings from a bandwidth perspective. Those are some really exciting things to embrace from a technology perspective, but it's also not a just buy this thing, plug it in, set it and forget it, and I'm done. So there's a journey that's in there, and it's a people, process, and technology journey, and enlist the right folks to help you with that journey. So Mike, Doug, you guys rock. Thanks for joining me. This sounds like we'll probably do part 3 of this thing, but there's so much to talk about.
Anytime.
But,
This was great.
If you guys out there would like to know more about how we do this and other things, please visit us at insightcdct.com. Thanks and have a great day.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.